Good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Conversation, aka The Nerd Show, where we get together and chat with some of the smartest people I know. We're going to be changing up a little bit. We've been wanting to bring Cypher in for quite a while to this show because he gives it a particular perspective that I think balances it out, but also in the regard that he was on vacation, and now that he is back, we have been able to bring him in fully, and hopefully he'll be pretty regular on this one.
I thought we brought him on because his hair brought a sex appeal to the program that was sorely lacking before he was here. I thought
can you
really
stop giving away all of our secrets, please? I would really appreciate it.
No, seems right.
It is. It's correct. It's fine.
All right. So anyway, he is a he's a computer science analyst for a company that I cannot disclose, but it is good to see our good friend Cypher here, kicking ass and taking names as he usually does. It is a pleasure, and you can always catch him out on the CSP News Roundup, usually right before the show starts. Next, he is an immigration lawyer out of Omaha, Nebraska. You know him, you love him. It's Nate Dallon is in the house. How you doing, Nate?
Good, doing real good.
All right, and we're going to be doing some nerd shit again today. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember I was just like, wow, it's so nerdy. Even I don't know much about it. All right. So, Nate, as usual, you can take the lead on this. Let me know if I need to pull up a screen show or anything. Hopefully the family treats you well. But
I was about to say, I'm getting knocks. This is bizarro. Here, give me 1 second. We're going to talk about today are three things. We're going to talk about the economy. We're going to talk about the Fed, and we're going to talk about if the Democrats' fortunes have turned, and they're in a much better position now than they were even just 2 weeks ago. But I want to talk about that. But give me 1 second. Muted. I'm back, and now I'm unmuted. Okay. So I got to go back. Disinflation and the comeback. It feels good to be a Democrat, but will last. Then the Fed's next moves. That's what I recommended we talk about today. And I think if we go more or less in that order, we're going to be pretty happy. So disinflation and the Democratic comeback. Okay. So the Republican talking points have been very specific, and they've been, frankly, kind of on point, right? That there's been an inflation problem. And it looks pretty clear that inflation peaked around mid-June. At least oil prices certainly did. And then some of the other commodities started to come down mid-June. And now the data has finally caught up with what we were seeing on the ground already, which is inflation was in fact transitory. And I know that brings a lot of sad tears to a lot of eyes. But I think that this was we've been talking about this on this show for quite some time, that this was the direction of things, and that is not a huge surprise. I just want to know, especially from Cypher's perspective, what did you see, like, let's say in June, that started to let you think personally that this inflation train was going to start to slow down and possibly even reverse?
So the same thing that KOE saw in March, that thought he was going to go into a recession. So like a little dig in.
Yeah, so our friend Phil KOE, you think that as soon as you saw oil prices flatten, you thought now they're going to reverse, and then that's really the whole game, right? So
it was that, but it was also the core CPI. Core always trends before general inflation, from my understanding. And so when core CPI started to decrease, it was like, okay, cool, like that's a wrap. We're gonna see inflation. Now, I didn't know the exact time frame that this was gonna happen. I told people, like, when before Russia invaded Ukraine, I was telling people May, June, maybe. I think I had maybe April in there. And then when Putin invaded, I'm like, okay, food prices are going to go up. Like, all this stuff's going to happen. Let's push that out like 3 or 4 months. And so I started telling people probably July, because the Fed also reacted. And so everything was kind of just coming up in that direction, more or less. And yeah, it turns out that I was more or less correct, or at least one data point does not a trend make, but it's good news. So.
Yeah. So do you think then, what do you think the big driver of the drawdown in inflation is? Do you think we just got supply up? Do you think the Fed really did start to crush demand? Like, what's your thinking on this?
So it's gonna be dependent on the commodity you're looking at, or the thing you're looking at. So I have a person in my chat saying like gas and airfare are down, inflation gone. He's being tongue in cheek here, but rent, electricity, food, everything else is going up, right? So what that tells me is like what we saw essentially is that after the Fed reacted, you had everything that you would expect to happen from that. You had home builders to start to slow down. You started seeing inventory of homes already start to build up, and it was crushing the ability for people to get mortgages essentially and cool down the housing demand. On the back end of that, the sanctions on Russia, ironically, I think, are actually helping with the overall picture when it comes to oil prices, because they are cutting so into the pricing that they're selling that they could have been getting, and they're just pumping out so much more oil to make up for that huge price cut that they're offering. It's like 25-30% or so, that it's actually putting downward pressure on demand from India and China, the two fastest growing economies in the world. One of the two, I think they are the two fastest, but Nigeria is not too far behind. And so since they're buying up that oil, that's relieving pressure on the rest of the world to be able to buy oil from other markets. And Saudi Arabia is in that too, and so they're just undercutting. They're not undercutting themselves, but that's allowing them to sell more oil to the rest of the world. And so just all these kind of factors came together, and we saw some decrease. And as energy goes, so goes the rest of everything else, because everything's energy related.
So really you think that the big key here is the supply of oil goes up, and as a consequence of supply going up, and that's the real base of all of the economy, right? And so as long as that commodity starts to head in the opposite direction of up, so the prices start to go down, everything else will slowly follow. Do you think that there are certain sectors that I don't even know how to phrase it. You just think that may not go down, right? Like, are there some sectors that like, oh yeah, we're just going to have some persistent high prices, probably not due to anything that's happened over the last 2 years. It was just going to happen.
Oh, well, I wouldn't say anything that happened, because to partly answer your question, I think that we're not going to see inventories return to the used car market and the main car market. And specifically because chip manufacturing, while it's being helped by the both chip acts, because there's two of them, that's not going to bring chip manufacturing online for 2 or 3 years, more likely in the United States. It's going to take that much time to build like the factories out and everything like that, even though Samsung started building other factories and stuff like that. And so that you have that aspect of it. And so I think you're going to still see sticky prices on that, and that's going to elevate inflation to a little bit of degree. I mean, the cars are selling 30% over MSRP. People can't find a decently priced truck for under $45,000 right now. No, I don't see that going away. I think that's going to stay sticky for a bit. I also do fear that food prices are going to be a little elevated, because the war in Ukraine started right when the growing season would start. And it's going to continue on. And while a lot of not all the Tiberius, you're gonna have to correct me on this if I'm wrong though, but my understanding is that not all the farmland is in the east of Ukraine. So there's actually some towards where the fighting is not happening, so they can actually harvest what has been planted, but that's going to be a lower output than normal. 20-30% lower output at minimum than what would normally happen. And we have droughts in the United States. So I don't think food prices are going to come down as much. I do think the pace of inflation will slow on food prices, but I don't see any deflation happening for food, at least not in the near term.
Giving a bit of a strategic overview into what he was saying is that actually, believe it or not, the majority of the Russian wheat belt is not in the east. It's actually in the west. I'm sorry, not the Russian wheat belt, the Ukrainian wheat belt. The problem is the eastern half is actually a little bit more arid. It's actually a part of the greater Eurasian steppe. And so while you do have quite a bit of agriculture here, is that if you're actually talking about the far more beneficial soil, but also the beneficial growing patterns, it's actually everything west of the Dnieper River. So these are places that haven't really been a combat zone that have been active. Here's the issue. Through most of the Ukrainian infrastructure, particularly through the center of the country, which some of these areas have been combat areas, some of them are not, is that you take everything. You put it on a truck or you put it on a train and you send it to one of the local infrastructure sites on the Dnieper River, and then you float it out. Problem. Everything from Zaporozhye all the way down to Kherson is now occupied by the Russians on at least one of the banks, if not both. So that avenue is shut down. Now, a lot of people are talking about Odessa, and there's two reasons for that. There is a major offloading facility in Odessa, but there's a issue here. My good friend Peter Zion likes to talk about how Odessa is important for wheat infrastructure and pretty much grain infrastructure in Ukraine. He's not wrong, but the actual Dnieper and its power to but basically to extend into the wider world doesn't come from Odessa. It comes from Kherson, which is actively occupied by the Russians right now. So the long and the short of what I'm trying to say is this. The best avenue that the Ukrainians have to export to the wider world has been shut down. And I don't trust the Russians to honor their agreement to keep it open. So I don't think most of that's going to happen. Odessa is reduced in capacity. The Russians have actually targeted it as basically as a strategic target. They haven't destroyed the port by any measure, but they've definitely done some damage. And when you combine the river and Odessa itself together, is that there's probably the better part of anywhere between 40 to 60% of the Ukrainian wheat crop, but just more the crop, not being able to get out. We don't know the definitive numbers on here, but we keep hearing some really good numbers out of Ukraine, and I'm just super skeptical. Now, I don't think it's as bad as Zion is letting on to. I think he's completely overgoing board here. This is one of the things I actually really disagree with him on, is that I think he's being overly too pessimistic. Everything that we have seen from the Ukrainians has actually been more on the positive end and definitely away from what he's been saying. And more particularly when it comes to that is that while the Ukrainian war is devastating and quite horrible, is that literally the places that the Russians have occupied overall have been not very agricultural zones, or the least populated agricultural zones. What the Russians have actually occupied, and I'm not saying this is actually a correlation here, is most of the mining areas, the places where you get metal ores, you get coal, you get even some of the natural gas reservoirs that are within Ukraine are in the areas where the Russians have largely occupied. I don't think that's on purpose in the regards that they're going specifically for that. I think it's largely due to the fact that the Russians have only really had success out of Crimea, and everything else has just been bogged down. They haven't even taken over all of Luhansk and Donetsk yet, and it's been 6 months now since this war almost kicked off. Yeah, so that I'll give a sit rep on that at some point here soon. I know I need to, and a lot of people are asking me about the Chinese economy, because it looks like, I'm going to say it again, we might be in the final 12 months of China. It's looking horrific over there, and no one's talking about it. And I'm not memeing when I say that. There is some really shady shit going on right now. But anyway, to wrap this all up, at least for the Ukrainian segment, is that the concern isn't American food. The concern isn't even European food. Most of the Ukrainian grains do not go into Europe. It goes to the Middle East. And figuratively, the last time the Russians shut down, we had Arab Spring. Now you've got the Ukrainians at a reduced supply. You got the Russians basically boycotted. And you have the Indians trying to play ball, but also hampering down on their exports along with the Chinese. We could absolutely see this, or I don't even think it'll be this year. I think it'll just really kind of set in at the beginning of next year, is that we're going to see the most unstable political situation that we've seen in the Middle East in probably the last 100 years. And that's actually what concerns me more than anything geopolitically right now, is that even with the protractors saying things are better than what we expected, and people saying things are far worse than what we expected, every piece of data that I'm looking at says that the Middle East is going to catch on fire next year.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, let's think about this, since we want to be all doomer. Like, it just took Ty 3 minutes. We basically had just nothing but good news, and then Ty was like, "Yeah, but genocide in the Middle East," and it's like, "Oh, well, lovely." So if we're gonna be all doomer, I was gonna wait till a little bit later on this, but
we can still wait.
Yeah, okay, let's still wait. Let's focus on if you're a Democrat, you should be feeling real good right now, right?
No,
I think.
No?
Isn't this a good time to be a Democrat?
you know.
I want to hear why Tiberius? Why isn't it a good time to be a Democrat? I'm a Democrat. Okay. I'm happy. Like, come on, tell me why it should be doom and gloom, bro.
Okay, so number one is that while I totally get legislatively, it looks like the Democrats are probably going to pull it out at the 11th hour.
Big facts.
Okay, so the issue here is that so it's cleared the Senate from everything that I've seen, right? This is a $375 billion bill, right?
Yeah. Based.
And then I don't see any reason why it's not going to clear the House. The president will obviously sign it. Number one is that no one's going to really feel anything about this until next year, right? So True. even if you can say, hey, we got the legislative win, this applies to one of the most toxic parts of the Democratic Party apparatus, and that is the environmentalists. Don't get me wrong, I consider myself a green in some respects, but I'm a green that can do fucking math. And the problem with a lot of these programs is I don't think they help a lot of people, except for the people who are neck deep in these industries who are solar and wind and whatnot. Basically, what I'm saying is this. Two things. One, when it comes to the average voting population, I don't think this is a piece of legislation that really matters to a lot of people. Number two, even if it did, I don't think they're going to see any kind of positive repercussions from this until next year, because usually that's when it goes into effect anyway. So I think it was way too little, way too late. And the Democrats are still going to bleed out the fucking nose. On the other hand, does the economic numbers look a little better? I would actually argue no. I think I'm serious. I'm looking at the economic numbers that I'm seeing, and it's like, hey, inflation's going down finally. It's great. Yeah, it is. But it looks like we're in stagflation, and it doesn't look like we're leaving. Is that we're going to see negative economic growth for the better part of this year, and I don't think that's going to reverse. If it does, it'll probably be fourth quarter because you're going to see a lot of inventory drop. But if it is, that will be it. I do not expect good economic numbers for the rest of the year as far as economic growth. I think that is why we're seeing the stagflation numbers actually get better, is that inflation's going down because people are literally just running out of time and energy to spend extra on all this shit, particularly when it came to fuel, particularly when it came to food. But go ahead and push back on that if you desire.
Sure, I'll push back a little bit on it, just a tad. So from some of the economic numbers that I've looked at, real spending actually increased. What was it, May and June still? Right? In July, I think there was virtually no change from June. I might be wrong about that, but looks like Nate's telling me I'm correct. So that accounts for inflation. So that means that people, I think what we're seeing happen is the going back to whatever the fuck normal actually is in the modern economy. And part of that means spending down on the huge amount of savings people built up through the pandemic, and going back to credit card spending. But that doesn't mean people are unable to meet their needs, at least broadly speaking. Not saying it doesn't suck. It sucks. Inflation's terrible. Get it. I'm not meaning to try to downplay inflation whatsoever, so don't come at me. I understand, okay? Just because I'm privileged enough to not have to worry about what my food budget is because it's just me and my wife doesn't mean other people don't have to worry about theirs. So I get it, all right? With that said, because of the job numbers, 500,000 beating expectations by like nearly 50%. The real spending going up, inflation coming down, core CPI falling for the last 3 or 4 months. We're seeing that decrease in inflation. We're seeing rapid decrease in gas prices, and that's because of the Chinese economy, like Tiberius alluded to, falling fast because of the fuckery that's going on there. I think, it's morning in American again, guys. We're back. We're back. We're not in Carter territory. We're in Trump being like the last 2 years of Carter, and Biden being the first 2 years of fucking Reagan. We got massive spending bills coming up that it's going to June up the economy. We got actual taxes being increased, so that's going to tamp down on inflation. We have actual material impact of the drug prices. Huge win. That's a huge fucking win. People do not understand this, right? People do not understand that Medicare is the price maker for drugs. Everybody is going to experience a decrease in drug prices with the drug prices that Medicare is going to negotiate down, because because they buy so much, they control so much of the market. control, quote unquote, so much in the market with their purchasing, that it is going to have a deep and recognizable impact for millions of people to rely on drugs. And that impact is going to be felt within the next year. It's going to be felt. You're going to see it in the stock price portfolios of any major pharmaceutical, and you're going to see that happen very quick. It's gonna start tapering off, because what is pharmaceutical industry going to want to do? They're going to want to look like they're playing ball in order to avoid any fallout from trying to fight it too much. So they're going to probably like give some concessions and be like, hey, don't negotiate too hard. But we know what people Biden's appointed. Biden, being the moderate liberals, pointed to some pretty progressive people to his administration. So I don't know, like, those are going to be pretty quick happening, and gas prices are just going to continue to fall down. Like they've gone down another week. So like that's how behind inflation numbers are. Like gas prices fell, what was it, 30 cents prior to July's numbers coming out, and then July's numbers come out and it fell another 20 cents. Looking at another 10 cents average probably in the next 2 weeks. Like, I think we're back to, like I said, back to normal, quote unquote.
I think this is definitely optimistic in some regards, but I do want to hit two things. Number one, when it came to the Biden jobs report, I haven't got a chance to really go over that in super detail. But one of the things that concerns me is that this is literally one of the most anti-democratic jobs report I've seen in a long time. And what I mean by that is that it used to be when a Democratic jobs report would come out under a Democratic administration, it would have lower job numbers than what you would see under a Republican. But what you would see is that these were long-term jobs, these were healthier jobs, these were career and salary jobs, is what we would see under the Democrats. The Republicans used to, whenever they pushed out economic numbers, they would have a lot of these like high volume, part-time, 1099 jobs that would fire off. And the thing that I've seen, at least with this one, at least what's been indicated to me, is that that's actually what we're seeing this time under a Democratic administration, is that people are, taking up jobs at DoorDash, like yours truly, or Aflac, or whatever the hell else. And we're not seeing nearly the career growth that provides people $20,000, $30,000 a year. We're seeing a lot more. I'm sorry. Did I say 20, 30? I meant like $40,000 and $50,000 a year jobs. We're seeing a lot of 20 and 30,000 year jobs under a Democratic administration, which is quite interesting.
Yeah,
and
but that's the new normal. Cypher got this right. Like that's just the new normal. That's been true since 2010.
Yeah.
Right. Like.
Okay. Well.
Because I get your point, but I just think like the second Obama term was exactly what you were describing, Ty. No, I mean, it wasn't like the historical. You were talking about Clinton, right? You're right. The Clinton numbers were like unbelievably good. And then, of course, the Obama numbers were weird because he came in right during the middle of the great financial crisis. But the second half of his, I think that Cypher's characterization that we're back to the last 12 years.
Yeah,
I think that's right. Because it's been sucky for a decade. Sorry, Ty. What have you been doing for the last decade? You've been sucking on the teat of a sucky economy, and it sucks. And that's exactly the problem. Trump didn't do anything to fix it, and I think that Biden could do more to fix it. Let's put it that way.
Okay, that's fine.
And to that point, though, we saw job growth across all industries. Now, most of those were in the service industry, but again, that's because people are actually taking their money that they spent during the pandemic on stuff and spending it on events and outings and stuff like that now. So you're seeing the reconfiguration of the pandemic economy going back to, quote, the new normal, because we're a service-based economy that happened to go through a year or two where people couldn't go out and do things. So they bought stuff and sat at home and did everything that they could to avoid, getting COVID and potentially dying. And
there's an important factor that everybody's forgetting in here, and that our economy goes through cycles, I guess, if you want to call it such, where, for example, like with gas prices tend to go up typically in the summer, and they tend to decline after the summer because of traveling and stuff like that. And the same likelihood with the service workers, right? I would imagine that we would have people more at home, more able to go out and do things during the summer. And so we would see likely employment skyrocket during the summer. So these are things to keep in mind as we're going through all this, is that just before we start cheering, not to cheer too early either.
All right.
Well, these are
Doghouse.
seasonal. Aren't they seasonal adjusted though? Like that's how
they are seasonally adjusted.
Tamp that down.
Okay. Let me tell you. So, Doghouse, I get your point, and I just put up all the bad news. That's the thing that I just tried to share with Ty. I don't know if he can share it to everybody, but
Yeah, I got it.
So let's talk about the good news. Think of this last jobs report with full recovery from the pandemic, right? Like if you just look, all the jobs that were lost in 2020, it took us this long to get them all back. We just got the last of them back, and that means it's sort of the suckier jobs. Ty's point is not wrong. It's a lot of part-time work. It's a lot of people who are now doing 2 and 3 jobs, right? That kind of a situation. But frankly, that was the situation we were in at the end of 2019. And like, that's what we did was we just pulled the 2019 employment situation to the present. And if you recall, Trump was like, oh, I'm the sexiest president who's ever lived. Look, everybody's got a job. We're basically back to that exact same spot. We're like so close. We are so close. The only reason that we're a little bit different now is the participation rate has changed, mostly because of early retirements and then people who decided to not work because of real COVID concerns, like the truly compromised have not really gone back to work all the way, or if they have, it's in a different capacity. So there's a little bit of separation there, but it's like super, super tiny. So yes, the Democrats should be doing a victory lap right now. Employment is saving the day. However, there's still problems, but I mean, I think they should be very happy right now.
One thing about the early retirement numbers, ironically, crypto minted a lot of new millionaires. They completely dropped out of the labor market, and those new millionaires were highly concentrated on the young demographics. We're talking people between the ages of 24 and 36. I want to say that's where there was mostly concentrated at. So labor force participation, that number is just broken forever now. We need a new number. We need it's not going back, people. It counts too many things that people generally see as positive. For example, if you got a pay increase between 2020 and 2022 that allowed you to have one parent sit at home and watch your kids during the pandemic, and that was good for them and your family, what's the point of that person going back to work? There isn't one. That's a negative on that front.
This is and the thing is with this though is it's very difficult to say that what kind of a pay increase per se would replace another or significant other's salary. I mean, even like looking at my own personal situation and anecdotally speaking, yes, my wife got a pay increase, but it was nowhere near enough to really warrant her staying home or anything like that, because we just can't afford that. Even I mean, if we're talking like a $10 or $15 increase per hour, absolutely, but we're talking like $2 or $3 an hour, maybe $5 at the most.
And so it depends on the economic strata that you're in too, right? So I don't know your personal situation, Doghouse. Do you have kids?
Sure, no, I do. I have a child.
So how much was your child care?
So that is a factor that we have considered, is how much are we paying in childcare versus how much I would have to make extra to cover that childcare cost. But there's also the problem with that is it's not just merely childcare costs. There are other bills that get considered into that. When you make an income, all of that comes into play, whether it be housing, cars, electricity, water, so on and so on and so forth, rent, mortgage.
So let's look at the lowest income tier here. That is where a lot of the income increases have been concentrated at. Middle's been squeezed a little bit. Okay, don't get me wrong. But people in the upper inbound of income, people making anywhere between as a single income, we'll say $80,000, but as a dual income, we'll say 90 and 130,000. Had an increase, and the people on the bottom had an increase because of the wage labor pressure from the
bottom,
labor at the bottom. So if you were
McDonald's at $15 an hour, agree.
McDonald's at $15 an hour, right? So if you had to survive off of 2 incomes at $10 an hour, and you were paying out of that shitty childcare cost that was eating half of that, and you're suddenly at 20. Why are you going to pay for that? Pay for the child?
Are you saying somebody that was like one person was making $10 an hour and they went up to 20? That seems.
I'm saying 2 people making $10 to $11 an hour, struggling. Then one of those people got into an $18 to $22 an hour job. That would be by childcare cost. And so those people would drop out of labor
They
force.
started doing OnlyFans, Doghouse. Don't freak out. They're making good money now.
I'm looking at going from $10 to $20 an hour. I mean, again, we've seen McDonald's workers go up to 15. So I suppose there is a realm where it could have been they were making 9 or 10 and they went up to 15.
Yes.
But we're talking about a $10 an hour increase in one spouse's income, and I just don't see that.
Changing jobs. A lot of people changed jobs during the pandemic, quit their shitty service industry jobs, got training or whatever else have you, or moved into a better paying position because they're quit and was able to get hired and had up to double their income made. And I'm saying people in that situation cannot justify paying for childcare since half of that income alone is going to go to childcare. At least half of it. That's how expensive childcare is. So the people that are in that situation are going to drop out.
Well, my wife stays home.
Yeah, I mean, because like,
and I'm not saying
three kids. It's got three. I got 3 niños. You count that up. She have to be making like 90 grand.
No, seriously, like that's what it's the average cost is $1,000 per child for childcare.
Yeah,
it's fucking ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah, per month.
Yeah,
and
I'd be dropping $36,000 to $40,000. Yeah, that's right. And she doesn't get counted in GDP, and that's bullcrap. Universal basic income. No, I digress. Okay, Doghouse, I get it. You know, you have a bunch of good points. I kind of don't care about this conversation. I want to switch. I just want to say, Doghouse, his spidey sense is saying, why doesn't it feel like most of the people I know are getting a relief inside of their budgets if everybody's got a job and everybody's getting pay raises, right? Because both of those things have basically happened. People are working hard and they're actually making more money than they used to be, but they're still feeling the crunches. Part of that's the inflation. That's not all of it, though. Right? That's not all of it. And so Doghouse's point is good. The Democrats have gotten us to this spot, and it was an important spot to get to. The question now becomes, how do you go to the next level? Can 0.5% of GDP growth next year make people happy? Right? If some of these inflationary pressures persist, if the whole country can't generate more goods and services, then where is the raise going to come from? And then this brings up my little graph over here, which I sent earlier, and Cypher was like, what is this mess? Okay.
Yeah, I can't.
So this mess.
Before you go on, can you hit F11 on your screen so it gets a little bigger?
Hi, F11. Oh, here, I can do that here. Maybe. Boom. Is that a little better?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, so these are the 4 lines of doom. That's what I would guess I would call them. The red line is what we'll look at first. It's the easiest to see, and it's also the weirdest. That's savings. So that's savings for consumers. This is consumer saving. So, hey, check it out. Whenever the government sends helicopter money, Americans save it. So, by the way, this is actually really critical, I think, for UBI folks like myself. We actually have some evidence now that Americans are actually pretty good about taking care of cash that's sent directly to their bank account, because look at those savings rates. The savings rates, especially in the 2020, when those first stimulus checks came out, they immediately got saved and paid down debt. I didn't put up any debt numbers on here, but like it was incredible. They paid off credit cards, they paid off personal loans, and they saved all at the same time. It was truly marvelous to behold. It was unbelievable. But you can see, here's what inflation has done since the last round of money in March of 2021, plus the child tax credits a little bit. Inflation has eaten into those, and now we're actually below trend line from 2020. So like that's a little bit of a concern, right? So even though things are good, people have jobs, savings are still getting eroded away. Cypher mentioned this earlier. They're going now to their credit cards. We could talk about that another week. The next weird green line that is close to the red line, that is global trade since 2020. And you'll notice something, that America drives global trade in a big way. So Americans send out a bunch of helicopter money and global trade starts to immediately trend up. Even though the rest of the world was shut down super hard in 2020, American consumers saved the whole world economy. Yes, Europe, you're welcome. Now, as Americans' savings rates go down, you see that world trade, since its peak in March of 2021, it is not going the right way. So that means global GDP is bad. So we could go a tour around the world. Japan, in recession. China, we don't know, but we know they're in recession. Europe, in recession. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, recession, recession, recession. The US is the only stable ship out on the ocean right now. It's totally wild to me what's happening out there. And it's a fascinating question. Can the United States get some economic growth inside of an environment where all of their neighbors and trading partners are negative. Totally crazy. The purple line.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just so,
Yeah.
so Professor, I need to ask you an economic. So when you're saying negative, are you talking about negative GDP growth, or are we talking about?
Yes.
Because okay, so wasn't the past 2 quarters? Now I know that this is a hot button issue.
Oh boy.
Oh my God.
I got blocked on Twitter for this today, guys.
Okay.
I don't get blocked very often, but I got blocked on Twitter today because of it.
I'm asking this out of like genuine sincerity, not like a gotcha, because like this has been a very hot button question, and me and Cypher even got into this about the colloquial versus the NEBR definition of recession.
Yeah.
And that's why I was curious, like,
Okay.
in the past 2 quarters we've had a negative GDP decline. Granted, it's not been steep. I'll give you that.
Right. It's a slight. So if it is recession, it's the most mild recession in the history of recessions. But yes, it's slightly negative. So here's my answer to your question, because after I got blocked today by a Keynesian econ guy who's written a very interesting book, and I really like him as a Twitter follow. He's a blue check mark. He blocked the crap out of me over this exact topic. And like, it was not deserved. I think he was in a mood, but whatever, life is life, right? Because I think he was dealing with a lot of crap today having to do with some inflation issues and his definition of inflation, which is a little bit goofy dukes, but whatever, I digress. So to answer your question, Doghouse, it goes like this. Everywhere and always, the definition was 2 quarters consecutive of negative GDP growth as a recession until 1977. In 1977, the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States got its dual mandate, and it said full employment. And so one of the things that Congress did was it included language in a resolution that the NEBR said, we're going to weight the labor part highly inside of our equation for recession. So if we have slightly negative GDP, they are actually thinking about the opposite problem. You can't say I have great GDP, but we're losing jobs, because that was happening in the late 70s.
Yep.
So like assume GDP was awesome in like quarter four of 78 and Q1 of 79, but jobs went down, right? So imagine that scenario. Congress wanted a recession to appear in the data given that kind of an environment, because Congress wanted the Fed and other institutions inside the executive to say, no, it's not just about making the rich people rich. We got to take care of people. So we want employment to be a bigger part of the equation, so that positive GDP, we still want the recession flag to go up, even if GDP is slightly positive. Okay, that was the idea. Well, in this goofy Duke's world, 40 years later, we now have this situation where the NBRE or NEBR are like, hey, NBER, they say, hey, the employment numbers are really good, so we must not be in recession, even though the GDP numbers aren't very good. And so that's why this has happened. If you look at like the IMF and some of the other, like the World Bank, they do not have it weighted regarding employment like the US does. And so this is what the big difference is. So it just depends. What's more important to you, GDP growth or the employment pool? Well, and if the employment pool is the most important thing, then things look okay. They don't look great, but they look okay. So that's
yeah. And from the research I've been able to do in terms of this particular topic, is the conclusion I came to was that colloquially, whatever you want to call that damn word, we have used negative 2 consecutive quarters. And matter of fact, it's been used in public speeches and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. We've seen it with like Obama or whatever it was, or Clinton or whatever. But the NEBR is the one that's kind of like the referee in this, that says, hey, yes, we are in a recession. But it seems like from what I understand, the NEBR may not release their findings until we're deep into the recession, or well after the recession has ended.
Well, the way to say that, Doghouse, is they reserve the right to change their minds later. So
right. Well, and that's been my main concern, is that it's like 2 sides are right on this, but in different degrees. It's
okay. Let me tell you, Doghouse, because I like your point. I just want to highlight this. So obviously, President Biden doesn't like the R word. Okay, now why wouldn't he like the R word? It means it's a lot of heat for him. However, we need to be really clear about this. What Democrats want to do, the largest impediment for them to achieve what they want to achieve is still inflation. Okay, so like, if let's just say for a minute that Biden came out and said, yeah, we're in recession right now. The reason he might say that is because that will hurt his popularity, right? But if he were to say that, he would have to immediately follow up and say, so my next economic plan or bill that's going into Congress is going to be a huge spending bill. We're going to forgive student loans and we're going to get checks out to Americans. Well, you can't do that in the environment of high inflation. So to Biden's credit, he has not run away from the inflation question, right? And why is that? Because he knows that for the agenda of the Democratic Party, since I've been alive, the largest impediment that they have is to get through the inflation issue. And the reason he's so excited is the passing of this most recent bill and a zero print for July coincide at the same time. So the largest Republican talking point to attack the bill isn't there, right? You could say, well, there's still generally high inflation in the economy, but it's moving in the opposite direction. And so that's why the messaging looked a little goofy, Dukes. And I think that there will come a time where Biden does use the R word, but he's going to use it and say, therefore, let's do something about it, right? Yeah. He said, look, there's inflation. We're going to do something about it. Inflation Protection Act. The next one is going to be recession. Oh, look, let's do something about it. Let's get the child tax credit going. Let's get money out to people for child.
Yes.
Right. So, stuff like that. So that's why the word game has been so confusing for people.
What about the, because I remember when me and Cypher were going back and forth on this, there was a study or a report that I had linked. I had to look for it and dig it up, but I think it was the CBO report or something, some kind of report that looked at the impact from the NRA, and it seemed that it was relying very heavily on the whole pay for itself thing based on the 15% corporate tax. Very heavily. In fact, it was like 50+% or something like that, if I recall.
Well, okay, yeah. So, Doghouse, this is a good point. So, of course, one of the ways that you can try to control inflation is by taxing the people, right? Now, as a Democrat, of course, you want to keep all of that pain on the bad guys, which is the Zuckerbergs of the universe, right? So, like, that's cool.
Yeah, fuck Zuck.
And corporations generally, right? But to your point, the theory then has to be that we're going to cause corporations to pay more to help keep inflation down, because otherwise the $400 billion it'll flow out into an economy and it will cause prices to rise. In order to fight that, they have to have a tax in there. So, I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah, and that was my concern, is without that 15%, that it would basically mean that it's belly up, because it relies so heavily on that 15% corporate tax.
Sure.
Yeah, from the CBO's perspective, that's true. Yeah.
I mean, that's generally true too, even from MMT perspective, that it's going to be that way. So.
Yeah. Okay. And now I just want to mention too, I'm actually on team deflation. I've been on team deflation for a long time. So unless the government chooses to spend more money, the Democrats are going to continue to look like geniuses, except we'll get into a deeper recession. So like I think right now, all of the momentum is to disinflation. And I actually do think it'll wipe out, unless the government takes action, it's going to wipe out all of the inflation that we've seen. Right. And then once all that gets wiped out, then jobs will start to get lost. And then we're into a deflationary spiral. And then the government has to act. So now the hard part comes. And this is why, if I'm a Democrat and I'm with you, Doghouse, you've got to be very careful about what you do next, because they have to time the reversal at the right moment. They've got to find ways to get money to the people to help keep the teeter-totter from not overcorrecting the other direction.
No, it's
right
okay.
Now, all the data I've seen is going the other direction, right, in the actual real economy. And just to get back to my last slide, and then I can get off of this, the purple line is corporate profits. So like if you look at corporate profits in 2022, they only go to like the middle of March, April, right? So Q1. But like all of the data coming out of the individual corporations before they're put together by, I think it's the Bureau of Economic Analysis, did this number. Corporate profits are down. This is why GDP is shrinking, right? The corporations are losing money, even though everybody's employed. And then if you look at the green line, then that's our GDP generally. And GDP is down slightly. That's not a huge decline, but it's heading south. So you've got savings heading south, global trade heading south, corporate profits heading south, and GDP is following those three mega trends. And so the Democrats they're in a situation where they will continue to head south until like the war in Ukraine ending. That might help stabilize things so they can start heading north again, right? That would be good. Technological breakthrough would be good. Or we probably are going to need another round of stimulus in 2023, or else we'll hit a deep, nasty recession.
So that's... Yeah, sorry.
No, that's all. That's kind of where I'm at.
So to your point, Nate, though, Democrats don't have to worry about it because the likelihood of the Democrats maintaining the House and the Senate is virtually none. And so we'll just blame it on the Republicans when they take over and refuse to do any stimulus spending. And then the economy goes south and it'll be like, hey, look, we told y'all. And
I love it.
Like,
I love it.
Bruh.
Yeah, well, okay, now this is a Doghouse and tie question. So do either of you think the Republicans will blink? Like, let's assume McCarthy is in charge of the House, which, by the way, he couldn't run as for speaker for like a lot of years. He was like the number 2 guy for like a lot of years, and people kept going over the top of him to be speaker because his personal life is such a dumpster fire. But Trump normalized everything, and it's like the fact that you're kind of a bad person doesn't matter. So anyway, he's good to go now. But Doghouse and Ty, do you think that if McCarthy's in charge and the economy starts to look like it's going to crater mid-2023, and I don't just mean like, it kind of sucks, like it actually, like, no, like there's a problem, like we're running out of stuff here. Do you think he'll blink and save the economy, or is he just going to let this baby go down in flames into 2024 and we're going to be shooting each other? Because he might have to play ball.
So I go,
I can't speak to this because, quite honestly, the idea and the notion that a Speaker of the House is actually going to get off their ass and fucking do something blows my mind. So I'm gonna I'm gonna be 100% honest with that. So on the other side of that is that what is Joe Biden going to do? Number one, there is a big conversation on, is the Senate going to flip? Because every number that we have seen regarding the Senate is that it's probably a lot closer than some people led on to. Now, in some ways, this blows my mind, but it looks like in the states that matter, the Roe decision actually did piss off some really key people.
Let's go Fetterman.
Really didn't know. Okay. Number two is that while the House is probably going to swing 30 points, and I don't know, or I'm absolutely amazed it isn't going to swing 50, is that the reality at least is that by every number, the Republicans probably take the House and they probably have about 227 seats to anywhere between 240. I know that's a bit of a margin, but some of those races are going to be close. The fact that, one, we're getting to the point where the country is so locked between districts that there literally is only about 30 swing districts in the country is concerning to me. I don't know if that's actually a sign that we've actually done our districting really, really well or really, really bad, but that's a whole conversation for later. What does import me is this. The House is probably going Republican. The Senate's a toss-up, but at that point, I don't think it really terribly matters. And then it's down to the fact that the presidency is still going to be a Democrat. You've got a divided government at that point. And it's already been kind of divided as it is all the way up until the fact that Joe Manchin decided he remembered he was a Democrat again. So I just don't see anyone doing anything the next 2 years.
Well, okay. Then I mentioned this on our last show when Sam was here. And I think that if that's the case, number one, any bumps in the road in 2023 should terrify us. Right? Because if there is a huge economic downturn in, say, March of 2023, then there's not going to be a big response. If McCarthy's really going to dig his heels in, 2023 could get very nasty very fast. And number two, that means President Biden is going to set the world record for executive orders in a small window of time. He is going to tax, holiday, everything. Because the only way then to get stimulus out to the people is to basically just say, we're dropping all middle class taxes, like anything he can find. And he'll be like, fine, sue me, take me to the Supreme Court. It doesn't matter. I've got to save the economy. Yeah. And so that's when student loan relief could happen, right? He can make some executive orders taking money from parts of the government that he doesn't like so much and redeploying them into places like food stamps, right? He could do like national mandates to tell the universities, you have to take haircuts on all of your, tuition this year. So like crazy stuff could happen. And I would anticipate that he's going to push the envelope in every direction if McCarthy's not going to play ball, because otherwise it's just watch the country sink. I think 2023 is going to be really tough. It's possible that the rest of the world will start to recover and then we'll be okay. But remember, we are fighting the inertia of everybody else going negative. The U.S. has to not just lead, but drag 6 billion people with us into growth. And that's tough. That's a tough deal.
Yeah, I don't. Oh, I'm sorry, Cypher. You haven't talked very much.
No, go for it, and then I'll break in.
Yeah. So, if I were to say, I can't sit here and make an educated guess as to one way or the other. I'm going to lean more towards the Democrat way, and say that what's going to end up happening is that McCarthy will probably try to pass some legislation to say that, hey, I tried doing it. In reality, it was loaded with something the Democrats didn't like, and God forbid we have a split Congress, then something like that could happen. In terms of how midterms can go, I think that it could be anybody's race at this point. I think that this whole FBI thing, not that I'm in support of whatever was going on, but I think it re-energized, and just from my dog sense, if you will, not spidey sense, but dog sense, I'm getting a lot of whatever. I'm trying to say re-energizing of the Republican base due to this. And of course, then you got the IRS thing going around, which that's another. I've literally been, by the way, just a side note, I've officially been called a far left operative. Literally, in some circles, I've been called a far left operative. Kid you not. So anyways, it's anybody's guess.
Yeah, so to Nate's point about all this doom and gloom, I am not on team deflation. At least not team deflation deeply. I think we might have some deflation. Again, this is as supply chains normalize, we're going to see prices fall because that's what happens when you have a supply crunch, right? So if the prices fall, that's a good thing. Well, it depends on if they're going to cascade and go into a deflation spiral. I don't see that happening. And the reason I don't see that happening is because the Fed is going to either tap the brakes and stop it, going to let off the brakes to stop it so that we get economic stimulus from the Fed, or there's going to be some sort of, like Nate said, Biden coming in with like loan forgiveness or pause on debt or something like that they can do from it. I also don't think that the numbers that we have from the last quarter are official yet. The first round of numbers always comes out and it always gets revised. How it's going to get revised, I don't know. It's possible it gets revised downward, but the numbers were so close and the job numbers so good, I don't think it's going to get revised downward. It might get revised upward, but again, we're talking like 1 percentage point either way, so it's not deep, not deep regardless of which way it goes. So I'm not on team deflation. I don't think we're going to have this doom and gloom thing, but China is a big part of the global economy, and they're playing fuck games, so that's it.
Doghouse, did you want to say something? Because if not, I have lots of things to say.
Now, so give me just 1 second.
All right, no, you take your time. Okay, so my response to you, Cypher, is that's actually quite good, assuming that the world isn't bleeding. But if you have the EU and China and Canada and Australia, and they're all trending the wrong direction, then it is hard for me to think like, oh yeah, we just sort of normalize, because 2019 normalization for the rest of the world, much harder sell, right? Like you could sell me, the US will normalize in 2022, so that we're more or less back to where we were in our 2019 economy. I think there's a very good case for that to be made. Mm-hmm. That is not true in Germany. That is not true in France. That is not true in Great Britain. It's not true in Spain. It's not true in Brazil. It's not true in Japan. It's not true in China. It is probably true in South Korea, by the way, where you just were. But like, if you just look around the world, it's like, okay, if 18 of the G20 are in hard situations, maybe our economy is so big and so awesome and so detached, we'll just shrug off the rest of the world's hardships. But that to me is like this extra lag that I'm like, that's just a lot to overcome.
I think China is going to come through and fix their housing problem, and that's going to fix a lot of their issues.
Oh, they're gonna build more houses for nobody, and they'll be
no, not that. They're just going to pay off the debt.
And building more houses there. That's how they're going to do it.
I didn't hear you, Doghouse. Can you repeat yourself?
Oh, I was saying that China is going to increase their housing, whatever you call it, capacity by taking over Taiwan, and then saying,
okay. So the issue with China right now isn't a housing crisis of not enough housing. It's a housing crisis caused by the fact that people they prepay their mortgages essentially before the things are built, and because of the recession that they're going through, the developers have stopped building And so people are refusing to pay their mortgages, which are backing other securities, because they're being told to go fuck yourselves. We're not going to have your house built for you like we said it was, because we're going under. So what I think is going to happen is that China's just going to do a giant jubilee and say, fuck it, we take over everything again, and then fix that problem. But in the interim, they're using, Xi Jinping's using it to do another power consolidation, which is why you have the fuckery going on with COVID still about the zero COVID cases thing, and using that to parlay into a bigger power grab. So when do I think that's going to happen? Probably won't be before the midterms, but it'll be before 2024. I know it's a big time span, but I think that's the more likely thing, unless somebody assassinates Xi Jinping, and then, well, everything's
okay. Hey man, you just got banned from traveling to China. No, I'm just kidding.
Right?
Okay, so TOS. No,
well,
okay.
I wasn't
so
saying that it's gonna happen.
I know, just give you a hard time. No, I just wanted to say that China is near the point where even if you just forgive debt, okay, like when you forgive debt, that means you are foregoing income, right? Like debt in terms of, so like let's just be clear, what is debt? And then I want to have like a little MMT conversation for a second, okay? Like I actually see this as super, super important. So
yeah, that's good.
I do not believe we have tried MMT in the United States yet. I want to be very clear about this. I know a lot of people are like, oh, big deficit spending means that we have MMT. Like, no. I want to be very specific as to why I think that, and it has to do with this technical definition of debt. So debt is an exchange of future spending brought into the present for the trade-off of decreased spending in the future. Okay, that's like what debt is. So I'm going to take future dollars, pull them into the present, and then I'm exchanging them. Those future dollars then extinguish once I get to the future. Now, the hope is I grow the economy in the meantime, doesn't matter, it's fine. So this is not me saying like debt is bad. I just think that that's what the trade-off is. Once you get to the point where true debt jubilee is placed on the table, right? Because right now, what's the United States doing? What's China doing? They're rolling the debt, meaning they need new debt. So they still go out to the market, the actual real life market, and they trade securities that are made out of thin air, treasuries and bonds and T-bills. Right? They take those, they make them, they print those, and they exchange them for real dollars in the economy, and those dollars come back. Now they have to pay the dollars back to the people who purchased the bonds at time of maturity. And so when that moment comes, we just issue new ones and sell them to the open market. And the open market has always obliged. We still have not seen a moment where the market has said, no, I'm not going to do this. But what Cypher, I think, is indicating is, well, China might just try to bypass going to the open market and just start forgiving debt, meaning they're not going to go to the open market and actually pull new dollars in. Well, if you do that, this breaks the relationship between your debt and your ability to grow, because you're robbing somebody else of income. I need to be very clear about this. If the Chinese are saying we're going to forgive a bunch of this debt, so it helps the debtors, but the debt holders now lose their income. That means China loses income. They're destroying one of the mechanisms by which they're able to make money. And I know that sounds like totally backwards, but if you own your own debt and then you forgive your own debt, that means you're foregoing the future income that holding that debt was going to generate. And so this is why they're toying with actually crossing the Rubicon and saying, we're going to start extinguishing debt and just printing new without creating this weird relationship of income and interest and everything else. And inside the United States, by the way, the best MMTers, well, there's two of them. Mosler is the best. If you say Stephanie Kelton, we're going to have fights. Mosler's the best. I mean, and then Nathan... She's not that good. And Nathan Tankes is the other super genius in that universe. Okay, so Nathan Tankes is super smart, and he says in order for us to become an MMT nation, the Fed must be able to issue its own securities, and right now it doesn't. Everything that's on the balance sheet of the Fed is the treasuries. And Treasury is bound to go through the process of issuing debt to the public and then having that kind of relationship. And then the Fed goes into the secondary market and soaks it up. And Nathan Tankes says, no. The way we're going to become a true MMT nation is by allowing the Fed to print their own securities. And if you do that, now you're into MMT land, okay? And this is important. I'm telling you right now, this is like an important technical distinction. I know it's super nerdy. But the reason it matters so much is because right now, the issuers of debt are making a ton of money. And if you forgive debt, that means you punish the people who issued the debt, even if it's the federal government. So you're messing up the circular flow of cash inside of the business cycle, which has basically held since Bretton Woods in every major economy on the planet. And if you're going to break that, that's cool. Like, I'm not saying that it's not time to contemplate that. There's very good, humane reasons to do it. Just know, when you cross that Rubicon, you are entering a new thing. The past is no longer helpful to you because you have changed the circular flow of money once you actually start to do that. And if China does it, it means that they're in really bad shape and they're already in recession. Like, why would you do it otherwise?
Yeah.
Right? So to get themselves out of recession, if they start forgiving debt, that's fine, but that means they're shooting somebody's income in the head. And if that income dries up, the new income must come from somewhere, or else you remain in recession. All you've done is moved the pain to a different area of the economy. The pain's still there. So it's an interesting problem. It's a very interesting problem. I would keep an eye on it. And this is why I think the Democrats might be in a situation where they need one more good bill before. Actually, it would be helpful for Biden if the recession hit in October and they were able to have an emergency session and they were able to win and get a bunch of stuff through and keep the economy humming for one more year. And then in 2024, he can try again. The Republicans can say no. And he's like, I saved us in 2022, and the Republicans aren't letting me do it right now. So if I were a Dem, I would be cheering for a fast reversal and a recession in October, emergency session, everybody votes, we save the economy, the Republicans still win, and then you go off into 2023 and it's stable. And that's probably what they need to do, but it needs to be debt-based. It can't be printed, or else it's going to be a problem.
So,
that's all. That's my rant.
Yeah. So
Rant
Nate,
over.
you forgot the part where Biden slowly claps because he can't mentally be able to like clap really quickly.
Hey, I want to say, as a voter, I voted for Joe Biden. Okay, I would recommend that he take more naps. That's all I'm saying. Like, I'm just saying, the president, he doesn't need to show off. There's a lot of good reporting that he is working long hours at the White House. Stop that. Reagan was done at 5. You can be done at 5. Old guys can take naps. It's fine. Just own it. Be like, you know what? I'm going to take a lot of naps. I'm going to focus on a few things. And then I'm going to dish out stuff to my cabinet. I'm not dishing it out to Kamala. Guys, Kamala's a disaster. I don't know how this, like, I thought she was going to be much better than this. She's been weird. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Doesn't matter. It's not relevant. But Biden needs to take more naps. I'm on team nap. More naps for Biden. I want that to start trending on Twitter. I want my president to be doing good things and not feeling like he has to prove himself. You don't have to prove yourself. You're president of the freaking country. You've done a million interesting good things in your life. You don't have to dick measure with anybody else ever again. Just take naps. Give us your best self. And if that means more naps, that means more naps. It's fine. Just own it.
Yeah.
Do a presser in slippers. It's fine. Like, just do it. It's fine. It's not a big deal. We're millennials. We don't care. The boomers already hate him. Doesn't matter. They're dying. The boomers are dying. You don't want their votes anyway. Let them vote for Trump. It doesn't matter. Come out in slippers and in flip-flops and be like, guys, I was just taking a nap. And all the millennials will be like, oh, it's a freaking great job. I think Biden's doing awesome. All his, he'll become much more like on point during his conferences. It'll be lovely. Just take more naps, President. That's all I'm saying.
I obviously didn't vote for Biden. And it's funny, too, that same person who called me a far-left operative when I explained to them I voted for Romney, Trump, and then Cruz in Texas Senate, he didn't believe me, and he said that I'm a far-left operative still. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? Pull up my ballot? Like, what the fuck? Like, I don't know how else to prove to you that I vote. Like, I just made a bold claim to, in this case, everybody, to let them know, hey, I voted for, like straight Republicans here. And I'm probably, like, by that definition alone, considered a Republican. Not to mention, all the other stuff. But, no, like...
Doghouse, I will never call you a leftist. You've won me over. You've flashed your bona fides. I'll come to your defense in the chat. I'll be like, no, Doghouse hates trans people just as much as any other Republican is fine.
No, look. You know what, though? It's so freaking hard to be like 1 minute where I'm like, okay, I can finally side with my righties on this when we're talking about like recession, for example, or something like that. But then they go and make some stupid ass freaking assertion about like the IRS coming to knock at your door, bust it down, and shoot you in the face. I'm like, bro, you had me and then you lost me. You do this to me. You reel me in and then you lose
Doghouse,
me.
you don't realize how often Cypher gets into fights with leftists who think that he's also a far-right fascist. Like, this is really funny that you're telling us this right now. You two are like the same guy, just like degrees different on the scale. It's really funny.
I told if any of y'all have ever interacted with this guy named Spectre Dave on Demon Machine. Anyways, I told him, I was like, look, if I'm far left, by some on the right and I'm far right by some on the left, then I'm doing something right. And that's all that matters to me, because that means I'm principled as fuck. So I'm happy with it. But like, it's a constant back and forth game with like my party. I'm like, oh yes, they're doing good. Oh, you're talking about some stupid shit with the IRS because nobody knows what the fuck goes on with the IRS. Okay, thank you, dumbasses. All right.
Well, I mean, they don't want the IRS to exist, right? So anytime you say the IRS is getting expanded, they're going to come for you and your family, and they're going to blast you down with the fucking shotgun and steal your baby and turn them into far right leftist activists.
The thing is, though, is that the IRS meme was such an easy optics win for the Republicans. It's unreal how easy of an optics win it is, because literally nobody has any idea what goes on at the IRS. You just know you file your taxes and that's it. People don't realize the like in-depth shit that goes on at the IRS. And so like when you have a majority of the population who has no idea what goes on, and you see that they're like there are special agents that are being told to use deadly force, they're thinking that the people who are basically filing your taxes are going to come knock at your door and bust it down and shoot you. What they don't see is that the complexity to start a criminal investigation where it involves the law enforcement division of the IRS, it's a lot lengthier than what it is. So typically you have you have your casual
mistake, 3 year, right?
So it's a little bit more it's like that, I think. But it's like where you have you might mark your income wrong a little bit, right? May fidget, maybe like it was like $30 or $50. They're not concerned about that. Your special agents could get 2 shits less about that. They'll send you a bill for it. But the ones that it's large, the revenue agent, not the special agent, but the revenue agent is going to audit your paperwork. They're going to go through and then take a second look at it and go, okay, hey, something's fishy here. And if it rises to the degree of like tax fraud or something, then they'll reference it over to the special agents. Then the special agents will go about their court process. They are a law enforcement officer. I've gotten into debates with people about this. They are sworn in law enforcement officers. They are
Isn't
trained.
the Secret Service in charge or part of the IRS? Like, isn't that obvious to people?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, no, like to your point though, it's like they have. I think they have multiple people carrying weapons at the IRS. That's my point.
Yeah. So
pretty much
that's
everybody
like
in the federal government does. Like,
and then like you look at the ammunition shit, and I looked into that. Okay, I'm sitting here. I'm like, okay, well, what's going on with this ammunition shit? This is no different. Literally, the amount that they have spent is about on average for what they have spent in past.
Yeah,
and
that's fine. So, Doghouse, you have found a bunch of friends. None of us are worried about the IRS. So, like, we can continue to talk about this. I'm sorry that your chats are full of sociopaths. You can tell them Nate Dallon specifically told you that you were right about the IRS, and that should end the conversation. I give you the Nate Dallon card pass on the IRS topic, so you should be fine. I just wanted to, because we're getting to the point where my butt starts to hurt because I'm sitting on a steel chair, and so that's normally the time that I need to figure this out. It's the Fed's next moves. I want to end on this topic, if that's permissible. So here's the Fed's. It's the Fed's next moves. So there are 10 things that the Federal Reserve can do. Okay, it has 10 tools in its belt, and then it has a couple of temporary tools if the Treasury gets together and they decide to have a party during exigent circumstances. But the big 10, we're not going to name them all, but they're the ones that matter the most are overnight rates. That's a big one. Okay, the repo window. That's a big one. The reverse repo window. That's a big one. And then finally is their balance sheet. So that's quantitative easing. Right. So these are the 4 things: the rate at which they lend money to banks, the rate at which they lend they take treasury bonds away from hedge funds and give them money, and how often they get money from hedge funds in exchange for treasuries. That's the repo and reverse repo windows. And then finally, it's the quantitative easing, or like the size of the balance sheet, where they just buy stuff from the economy and they hold it. Okay. So if any of those things, if the balance sheet goes up, that means that they're fighting a recession. So if they start buying mortgages, if they start buying treasuries, that means they think that there's Doghouse got bored. That means that they think there's a recession and they need to juice things. And then the rates at the repo windows, like what percent cut they want for doing business with hedge funds. And then also at their open window, which is the rate at which they do business with banks. That kind of tells us a lot. So here's the question. Cypher, the next meeting is in September. Do you think they raise rates or lower rates? What's just your gut tell you? Because I think we're going to get another 0 to slightly negative inflation print in August. So we're going to go into September where it's flat or slightly negative, but it'll still come up as like 7 whatever for the whole year. So is the Fed going to tighten again or not?
I don't know. Jerome Powell's kind of a Volcker acolyte, so probably keep the rates going, which
Okay.
I'm concerned about. I'm really concerned that the Fed is going to push us into stagflation. We're not there yet, but I think that they have the ability to do
But
that.
if it happens in October, it might actually be good for the Democrats. That's my take. Okay. Now, the second question then is, so rates go up, meaning the cost of doing business with the Fed goes up. Cool. And that tightens things and slows things down. So the second question then is, do you think that they might start buying stuff on the open market and bringing it onto their balance sheet? Right? Because they could talk out of both sides of their mouth on this, and they could say, I'm going to tighten,
question.
I'm going to be Volcker with the rates, but I'm going to turn around and I'm going to buy mortgages from banks. Right? So like, I'll make it expensive to work with me, but then I'm also going to go out and buy a bunch of stuff in the market. By the way, the reason I mention this is Europe started doing that exact thing this month. The European Central Bank, they raised rates, but they started buying stuff. So they were helping the market and then also slowing down money flow in the market. So they're slowing flow, but they're purchasing assets to help get new money into the system. So it's a slower flow, but more money. How do you like that?
I mean, money velocity is what matters more, I think. So
Right. So you would say, slow down the flow, the circular flow of money in the economy by raising rates, but eject more dollars into the system out the back end. So it's a slower flow, but more cash, more liquidity.
See, I just wish they would do this, but help middle class people. Put more money into my IRA,
this is tough.
please.
Yeah. Okay. So here. Okay. This is a good. Okay. So this is a good point, and everybody in chat should recognize this. When the Fed does those moves, the people that benefit first are bajillionaires.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is exactly right, because they are limited in their mandate, so they don't have access to the stuff we care about.
Yep.
The closest thing that they can do is they can buy mortgages from banks, which will help keep housing prices high. My guess is most of the people listening and most of the people on this panel are not actually interested in that. We're more interested in housing prices becoming a little bit more affordable so we can go buy houses. But if Ty wants his house to shoot up another 20%, that might happen.
I wouldn't mind my house going up another 50. So, but
all right, never mind. So maybe we're all.
Would that say that I'm cool with my house going down to $150,000? I don't care. My equity doesn't fucking matter to me. I don't give a shit.
But that's the thing. That's the only way that the Fed kind of gets its fingers into Main Street, because everything else they do, they just have to hope that the banks, the hedge funds, and the credit markets will go help Main Street. It's just their hope. They do what they can, right? Because legally they're just not able to do much else. And so it is. Every time the Fed increases quantitative easing and pushes money out the back, you end up with financial stuff going really high. And sometimes that leads to wealth inequality issues. Sometimes it doesn't. Depends how they do it and how long they do it. But anyway, so that's what I'm looking for. I actually think that's my case. I think that they're going to raise rates and then print more money into the economy, and it's going to be goofy. They're going to simultaneously increase the speed and hit the brakes at the same time. So crazy dance they're doing. The other thing is they could just shock me and come out and say, we're just doing no rate hikes. We're just going to let things ride. That's probably the right choice, by the way. That's probably the right choice.
What I think is going to happen, I don't think they're going to go with the European Central Bank model of tapping the brakes and hitting the gas at the same time, so we go into a tailspin. What I think is going to end up happening is that they said there was going to be a 0.75 basis point raise. That might come down to 0.5. I think that's where Powell is going to be at. He's going to be like, we're going to ease off the brake a little bit, but we're still going to have it tapped because inflation numbers are high, because everybody doesn't realize that inflation lags by a fucking year, basically. Like that's what it basically boils down to. Everybody needs to pay attention to the month over month numbers a lot more than what they're doing, and not ignore the year over year. The year over year is important, but for trajectory, month over month is more important. And if you're seeing a downcrease in the month over month, that's going to take 2 or 3 months to see that downcrease in the year over year, because prices are still going up. You're still dealing with the supply shortages and everything like that. So maybe a 0.5. I really was hoping he would do a 0.5 this time around, but he did 0.75. The ghost of Volker rises again, and we'll never get the fuck off our back. But Biden could also come through with a $10,000 forgiveness right before the midterm, buy some of the votes, and also hit the gas on the fiscal side. So we'll see.
Well, I wish that were true. That the funny thing is, since we've been in forbearance,
Yeah.
forgiving it doesn't have as much punch as if we were paying. So, but yeah,
Well,
I get your point.
It depends though. So if they forgive, so there's one thing that he could do, which I think is in his power, and a lot of people would be like, okay, there wouldn't be as much pushback, broadly speaking, as there would be for full forgiveness. What I could see possibly being done by the stroke of a pen, and I don't know, I'm not saying Biden is going to do this, but it's a path, is not only forgive 10,000, but wipe out any interest accrued in the last 5 years.
Okay, yeah, that'd be big. Yeah, that'd be big.
So what that would do is you don't forgive it all, but you make people, you're going to have people, some people are going to have their loans completely forgiven. That is going to be people in the lower economic strata, and less payments going out, but payments still going out. So it's going to tap the brake, but not as much as it could. And that 10,000 forgiveness will free up some people, make people feel less indebted and more likely to spend, because they don't have to worry about that hanging over their head. So it's a weird situation that could happen, and I'd be interested to see it happen. So.
That's cool. I'd never heard of that. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. Ty, you got anything? Chat says we're dumb, so we should probably just peace out. We caused all the paint in all of their houses to start to crack. We just sucked all the moisture out.
Yeah, so I'll split hairs here. First thing, what should actually happen overall is that this country needs to understand what a healthy interest rate is, whether one way or another. I totally get the idea where you're like, hey, let's just make it to where like credit is cheap and easy to come by. But the reality here is this. One, the millennials are starting to get a little older, and they're not going to be consuming for much longer, in the regards that, yeah, we have kids, but we're not going to be spending money like we are, 27 or 24, right? We're going to be spending money just trying to make sure that the kids are taken care of, looking for a lot more health insurance, looking for a lot more of, basic necessities, paying for the house. And while the economy will reflect that in particular ways, you're probably seeing a lot more you're actually going to see a lot more recessionary numbers in that. Hopefully Americans can learn how to save a little bit, so maybe they can actually afford some of this shit. But also, when it comes down to it, is that you're probably going to need the Fed to get somewhere around 3% interest again, because you're going to need Gen X to actually be able to eke out a return, especially with the fact that if you're going to be having them as the primary tax crew, they're going to need some money to actually get taxed. Because the boomers aren't really making any money, and the primary generator of tax is income still. And so, yeah, it's going to be very interesting, because the boomers are still going to have a lot of wealth, but not passed it on yet. There's a lot. What should happen? Interest rates around 3%. We should actually expect a recession definitely towards the end of the decade. We can push it, but if things keep going the way they're going, it'll probably be rolling in and out. Very similar to what the Europeans were experiencing a decade ago, except we're seeing it now, because while we're demographically more stable, is that our economy is kind of all over the damn place. And I'm not seeing a lot of the inflationary measures that should be under control actually get under control. Oil is kind of the first one that's kind of settling back in, but I've got a few questions to ask on that. Anyway, what's likely to happen? Politically, we're fucked for the next 2 years, because I just don't see it where, seriously, I don't see it where the Democrats and the Republicans are going to sing Kumbaya, and it's going to remind us a lot about particularly the last 2 years of the Obama administration, in the regards that anything that can be put on the docket, whether it's Supreme Court justice, whether it is literally just basic bills, we could see it where the Congress literally just does another, we can't pay the bills, so we're going to have another 8 weeks of, budgetary battles, and, what do they call that? Where they shut down all the public buildings and shit.
The government shutdown?
Yeah. We'll probably see another one of that. Americans, get your shit together. I'm tired of hearing, even thinking about this. Like, Y'all can do better than this, but you got to stop electing people like MTG and AOC. Like you need people who actually understand math. And right now that is not happening. So until next time, I thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. My name's been Tyberius D, and I've been joined by CSP Cypher. You can check him out on Crowdsourced Politics over there on YouTube and Twitch. He does a lot of good stuff over there. And of course, he's a good friend of ours as well. Nate Dallon, if you ever need an immigration lawyer out of Omaha, you can definitely check him out. Well, he's not really online, but he's definitely in person. He does that real work out there in the world. And so if you ever need somebody to really do that for you, definitely go give him a call. But without further ado, thank you for joining us for another episode of The Conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.
All right, everybody. That was the Tiberius. There we go. That was the Tyberius D conversations. I was so glad to have joined them on that program. I'm going to be doing it more often. We will be right back.